The comms unit in my hand was still warm from the previous operator's grip when the alert tone cut through the forward staging area. I remember the light that morning, pale amber, the way all light is on Therathi Prime's outer continent, filtered through 100 kilometers of rust-colored particulate that the conclave called sacred sky. I remember thinking it looked like something was already burning. The message was 6 lines. I read it twice. 9 ships. The Covenant of Meros Relief Convoy, 9 white vessels bearing the humanitarian seal, carrying medics, field surgeons, patients being evacuated from the Velen corridor, and 312 civilian relief workers. They had been sailing under ceasefire flag for 11 hours. The Therathi Conclave's sanctified purification fleet had intercepted them at the edge of the Kessin observation radius, where the neutral station sensors would record everything clearly, and torched all 9 ships in sequence. Methodical, deliberate, starting with the hospital tenders and finishing with the evacuation transports. 4,009 souls. The Kessin observers had transmitted the sensor logs to every registered authority in 6-star systems before the last hull had gone cold. I set the comms unit down on a crate of field rations and stood very still for a moment. The conclave had filed a doctrinal statement within the hour. Human medical personnel, they declared, were spiritually contaminating vectors. Our practice of treating the dying, regardless of theological standing, was an offense against the natural order of suffering. The ceasefire, they argued, had never applied to vessels carrying instruments of doctrinal pollution. They had simply enforced the sacred boundary. They expected the matter to be reviewed by the Galactic Mediation Council within 90 days. They expected negotiation. They expected, I think, that we would absorb this the way we had absorbed smaller provocations. With formal protest, with grief management, the careful language of civilizations that still believed in process. They had mistaken our patience for capacity. I was a sergeant first class in the 43rd Rapid Landing Corps, attached to a forward survey team on the Therathi outer continent. We had been mapping approach vectors for a potential ground component that military command had been quietly modeling for 8 months. Not because war was inevitable, they had told us, but because preparation was prudent. By the time the Covenant of Meros burned, the maps were already drawn. The Ardent tide mobilized in 31 days, 880 warships. I watched the fleet designation get assigned on the command feeds, not named for rage, not named for grief, but named for what the tide does. It comes, it covers everything, and it asks nothing of the shore. The designation felt correct in a way that made my chest tighten. Someone at Fleet Command had understood what this was. Not a punitive strike, not a show of force. The final answer to a question Conclave had put to us with the ashes of 9 ships. The war declaration was transmitted on day 32, 41 words. I have memorized all of them. They did not invoke anger. They did not invoke grief, they stated. In the flat bureaucratic register of a civilization that has completed its deliberation, that Therathi Conclave had executed 4,009 human civilians under ceasefire protection, that this act had been classified as an offense without remedy, and that the Ardent tide had departed Earth space at 0400 hours, galactic standard. No channel for response was listed. No ceasefire was offered. The Conclave issued 3 theological proclamations in the week that followed. Their high clerics declared the approaching fleet a spiritual trial sent by their God authority. They mobilized their sanctified purification fleet, 214 warships, fast and purpose-built for system interdiction, the same configuration that had destroyed 9 Mercy ships without a single casualty to themselves. Their doctrine assumed that numerical disadvantage was irrelevant before divine sanction. They had won engagements against larger forces before, against opponents who had not fully committed. They appear to have believed, to the end, that our commitment was partial. My unit received repositioning orders on day 38. We were absorbed into Landing Group 7, assigned to the 43rd's primary assault element. Our maps, the ones we had spent 8 months drawing, became the operational framework for a ground component that had never officially existed, until the moment it did. I remember our company commander reviewing the approach vectors and saying nothing for a long time, then saying, "They had their time, that was all." The Ardent tide reached Therathi Prime on day 44. I was in the third wave of landing craft, 4,800 meters above the Amber Plains, when the fleet's first salvo struck the Conclave's orbital defense array. 880 ships do not fight like 214. They do not maneuver for position or seek to minimize engagement. They fill the available space and they solve the problem at scale, the way a flood solves the problem of an obstacle, not by going around it, but by becoming the condition under which the obstacle ceases to exist. The sanctified purification fleet was gone in 4 hours and 17 minutes. The Kessin observers recorded this as well. I assume they recorded it carefully. The ground component was for the installations. The Conclave had 12 surface installations on Therathi Prime, administrative centers, doctrinal archives, the sanctified fleet's ground logistic hubs, the high cleric residential complex in the capital. Our orders were specific and bounded: neutralize military and command infrastructure, secure the communications archive, establish a cordon. No civilian quarter was targeted. The rules of engagement were 8 pages long, and every member of Landing Group 7s had memorized them. We were not there for revenge in the chaotic sense. We were there because the response had to be total, and total means you clear the board. By midday, the capital was silent. I stood outside the main archival complex as my unit completed its sweep of the surrounding blocks. The amber light was everywhere. It came from above, and it reflected off the pale stone of the Conclave's buildings, and it made everything look ancient, ceremonial, like a place that had already been recorded and filed. A junior corporal came out of the archive entrance and told me the comms equipment inside was intact. I told him to secure it and call it in. He looked at the light and the empty streets and asked me if I thought it was over. I thought about the Covenant of Meros. I thought about 9 ships burning in sequence, most methodical to last. I thought about 4,009 people who had been sailing under a ceasefire flag because they trusted that the flag meant something, and about a conclave that had decided, theologically, that it did not. I thought about 31 days and 880 ships and 41 words that asked for nothing in return. It's over, I said. I filed my final field report that evening from a folding table set up in the amber light outside the archive. The last line of the report read, "All assigned objectives reached. Ardent tide operations complete." I transmitted it at 1800 hours and watched the signal confirmation blink once and go still. The Conclave had expected the Mediation Council. They had expected process. They had expected that 4,000 dead would become a line item in a long negotiation, weighed against theology and political cost, and the careful arithmetic of civilizations that still believed the math could be renegotiated. We sent them 880 ships instead. The math was not renegotiated.